my grad program, I didn't have to do a thesis per se, but I had to do a theory of performance excellence. And so I had to decide, like, what is my theory of, like, why people do well? Why does performance break down? And I was able to do it for combat sports. And so, because we have unique stressors, we're unregulated, we don't have a lot of support in that realm. It's inherently dangerous. It's very masculine, all of these aspects. So I wanted to make sure that people could feel authentic. And what does that mean? Well, acting within your values, doing things that are your way, doing things that you enjoy. Why are you doing it? What is your purpose? What is your why? And making sure that in the end, regardless of the outcome, that you had a performance that reflected who you are. Because you can do your best and not win, and you can win and not do your best.
Yeah. That actually, what you just said brings up, I think, something that we've talked about on the podcast a lot, and that is performance goals versus outcome goals. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, there's 3 types. So we have outcome, we have performance, we have process. Okay. And so the outcome is the least controllable. That is, if everything goes well, yeah, it'll happen. If I make the right decisions in the moment and I assess everything that I need to do in the moment and I react proficiently, it could happen. But I also have to recognize that I could do everything perfectly and the decision not go my way. I could have someone fleeing the mat. I could have someone stalling. I could have, the person didn't even show up. So there's a lot of things that can get in the way of achieving those outcome goals. So they can't be everything, but they are like the shooting for the moon, land amongst the stars kind of thing. Performance goals are a little bit more controllable. It might be in a match, I'm going to make sure that I go for my guard pull. I'm going to go for my guillotine. Every time, I'm going to make sure that my grips are strong. Things that you can control, whereas, the opportunity might not surface, but if it does, then you can say, I achieved that. And then in the other aspect of it, it would be process goals, which is completely controllable, which might be when I go into train, I'm going to make sure I show up. I'm going to get there. I'm going to train. Or I'm going to make sure that I don't sit out any rolls. Or I'm going to make sure that I, work on this sweep until it feels automatic. So the process goals are the most important, that lead to the performance goals, that lead to the outcome goals. But often what happens is people just have outcome goals and they have no idea how they're going to get there, or they listen to everyone else and then they'll overtrain. They train through injury. They start doping. They start cheating. They start doing things that maybe aren't within their character, but it's all for a means to an end.
Yeah. Okay. Because they only have that outcome in mind. They're not actually focused on the things that lead to the outcome.
I can name a few people in the jiu-jitsu scene that don't care how they get there. There was a time actually when I was doing Gracie Mag interviews and I interviewed Kaio at PANS, and he said, if we had more of a spectator-friendly sport, the competitors wouldn't have to pay because the spectators would be paying. We would be an entertainment sport. And so I used that same kind of question for Gabby Garcia. And I was like, and of course at that time they were beefing because I think he called her out for steroid, whatever it was. And so she was like, no, I don't care. I just want to win. I don't care how I win. I just want to win. And I'm like, there are 2 kinds of people.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Can you go too far the other direction and just be too process oriented?
Oh, yeah. Because so information processing just in general, like often we'll use a schema theory or even heuristics, which is breaking it down into chunks. When I am in this position, I do this. For example, someone pulls guard. Now I got a guard pass. I have to pass guard. That's my objective here. Or, go for an ankle lock, whatever, how risky you want to be, depending on the rule sets.
You're talking to the right guy.
And that is all, that's preference, right? There's no right or wrong. But whatever you choose to do, that has to be the game plan that you stick with, but at the same time focusing on, I want to hear more about your diving for footlocks instead of passing.
He's got it tattooed on his foot. So.
Oh, yeah. I have a tattoo of an ankle lock. I know we don't know each other that well yet, but now you know my tattoo. Yeah.
I have a toe hold.
Oh, you have a toe hold?
I have a toe hold.
You have a hold? What is
I got it in Iceland.
Oh, that's pretty dope.
In Iceland by an Italian dude. Really random.
That's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah,
I like
he put his
style.
little spin on it. Well, I wanted to do... sorry, that's a wrist lock. I wanted to do the toe hold, but the toe hold, I didn't want a foot on it. So I'm like, it's the same mechanism. So yeah. Because I won my no-gi world title with a wrist lock.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a great story.
Okay. Yeah.
We were kind of going And unless you want to ask Josh about his foot obsession.
I just to be clear, I still try to pass the guard. I just for the viewers listening at home.
So proud of you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He does. He has been working on passing the guard. That is for sure.
Right. But if you know like what your burden is and what your objective is. So we do cognitive phase, which is I do A, B, C, D, E, right? And then you have the associative phase, which is like maybe you just need a little bit of cues to get you to where you need to be. And that could be instructional self-talk where you're like, okay, remember, pin the knee. Okay, get rid of the versatility, heat, whatever it is that you're doing. And then continue or autonomous is like, I just think of A to D and I figure it out along the way. I don't need to go, wait, is it this? Is it that? And you know, that's the whole ecological approach.
This is what I was going to get into.
We were
you said,
going down
because you said information processing.
Yeah, as
and
soon
I
as
was
you
like,
said it, I lit up.
is that the opposite of ecological dynamics?
So I wouldn't say it's the opposite. I think that there are different stages of learning. And
so happy.
Okay.
We're all on the same page.
Right. So the ecological approach or gamification is where you allow people to be more continuous instead of regurgitating information. I have some clients, they're under like a very traditional gym that says, okay, we do the same warm up every day and then we do this move and I'm not going to tell you how we got there. I'm not going to tell you where you're supposed to go from here. This is just a very isolated thing and you have to do it exactly how I do it, but I'm not going to tell you why. You just have to remember. It's the same as so I sucked at like I took 3 AP classes and I failed all the tests. And I got no credit for it because I'm not great at test taking because regurgitating information wasn't really working for me. And then I went into English, creative writing, where I got my undergrad degree. And it was basically like, explain everything you know about this poet and their importance to this, you know, this era. And then I realized it was so much easier to brain dump and just to put all my information out there rather than remembering a very specific thing that may not actually serve me.
Right.
Because we can't, it's the same with learning a language. You can't just remember every single vocabulary. And that's what made learning Portuguese so hard. Because I'm like, what's the rule here? They're like, it's not. You just have to remember this is this. And I'm like, well, why is bon dia? Why is gia? It's ending in an A, yet it's masculine. Right. Tell me, you know, there's no real ruling. And so it makes it very hard. So schema is saying, we can consolidate, right? But you still need to know an actual representation of that, what that looks like. And so what happens is when you teach people sequential tasks, the sequential task becomes, what is that step? I forgot that step. You know, and then you either think that you can't do it, which we know if you perceive that you can't do it, you're not going to be able to do it. You won't try. But also I think about it as if I told you just to get chest to chest, you might just pull shit out of the ass. Like I don't even know what I'm doing. When I think about like, all right, I want to hold someone flat. I think about people standing on someone, you know, and like doing a tripod and holding down their shoulders or, you know, doing side control or north-south. So I do believe that you need to know the names. I think that the jargon is important. Otherwise, you'll never be able to communicate with another person in jiu-jitsu. You won't be doing jiu-jitsu. But you also need to have the gamification that says, I need you to just figure this out on your own. Also, there is a reference that I like to make. I think it's in, it's like the Republic of Plato. So Plato has this idea that there's a chair, and there's an idea of a chair. And the idea of a chair is something that you sit in. But in the real world, in reality, we have the real chair. So we all could be thinking about a different chair. I might be thinking of a beanbag. You might be thinking of a love seat. You might be thinking of like a desk in a school.
Is that the vibe I'm giving off?
Maybe.
Yeah, you look like a school desk.
You're very studious. You're very studious.
I look like a love seat.
He's on a love seat. He's like he's looking for a second, you know.
Yeah. You might be right.
Right.
As you were going around the room, I was like,
yeah. What am I?
She better not give me that fucking desk. Give me that fucking desk.
So these are just expressions of a chair.
Right.
It's not a chair. Right? They're all technically a chair, but it's only the idea of a chair. So it's an idea of a guard pass. I might say like, here's a knee slice, but there's a million ways to knee slice. This is how I like to do it. This is why I like to do it, but you can do it however you want to do it. But here's the concepts that you need to remember. And those concepts can happen to be like foot hooks. I foot hook when I'm in side control and I get like a knee on belly, sort of a shin along the belly, and I curve my foot along their hips so I can have contact. I know where they're at. This could be for an arm bar and tucking the foot under the person's ribs and hooking there. It could be a knee shield and having the knee across but hooking their sides so that you have an anchor point, or just X guard or butterfly. Like, so these concepts of being like, I call it being a sticky hooker, is like everywhere. Right? So if I
it took
give
me a
you,
second, but I got it.
Right? So if I said, like, you go be a sticky hooker, Josh. You go be a sticky hooker. Then, like, you know what that means. It means to stay in contact, to keep your connections in general.
Right. So that was my question, the fact that you're, like, mentioning a knee slide, because I've been deep in the rabbit hole of ecological stuff right now. I got really excited because, you know, Greg Souders runs Standard. Yeah, so I got really excited because I'm doing an interview with him next week because I'm doing a YouTube video. I'm going to interview like a bunch of people on the ecological approach, kind of get all the different sides of it. And the one thing that I can't understand is like, but you're going to ask this question in hot take, so I won't ask that question.
Go for it.
Well, I was going to ask, the question is, do jiu-jitsu techniques exist? And it almost sounded like the answer you were going for is like, we need names of stuff so that we know what it is we're trying to do.
An example of,
right.
But the objective stays the same, which why I think that schema theory is still important, because you can still consolidate in, you know, this is the guard pass, this is this. I do an inventory with my clients. I'll say, sometimes it's just an initiation inventory where it's like, what is the first guard pass that you're going to try? You get swept, right? You're trying not to get swept, but at some point you've got to accept that you're getting swept so that you can establish a guard. Otherwise, they're also going to just pass. And so if you had to decide which guard right away, what would it be? You know, okay, that doesn't work. What's your second one? What's your third one? So when you can automatically front load that information and kind of plan that out, and it's based off of observation of yourself and what you're good at, or what you hear from others that you're good at, or just, you know, yeah, this works. I know it works because it works. Then that's the idea that you have, so that quick decision making is there. And so if you can do it by position or situation, because there's a difference between I need to sweep, but this guy's up on points and he's stalling, versus I'm up on points and I don't really need to sweep, but I do need to prevent my guard from being passed. So it's situational, and that's where the gamification comes in.
You looked like you were about to say something important. we both took a breath.
I was just going to say, it sounds like the names of the techniques, or the techniques, the archetypical technique or whatever, are like they're like checkpoints or like places on a roadmap.
Yeah.
But how you get there is subject to each individual,
right,
provided that the concept is you probably have to take a car on a road, right?
Yeah.
But like which road you take
and which car you take
could be completely different. Exactly. Yeah.
And it almost seems like the techniques are just things that we like converge on, and like these like optimal movement patterns or whatever.
Right.
Because as part of this rabbit hole, I've been forcing Matt to do games with me.
I'm really enjoying it.
I love it.
It's fun.
For ADHD, it's great to keep someone engaged.
Yeah. Well,
did we just?
Sure.
I'm not diagnosed. I don't actually have the legal ability to diagnose, but
wait, I was like, what?
Diagnosed?
We just met. I swear.
Okay.
We just met.
It is very engaging though. But and then I realized like the first game was like, okay, Matt, we're gonna start. You're gonna go on to bottom half guard, whatever that is, and then I'm gonna go on top half guard, just my foot trapped, my knees out. And neither of us can use arms, and like the only way that I could get my foot out was like it ended up being just a knee slide, right? Because you can't like
you gotta manipulate your hips versus being able to isolate or anything.
Yeah, so like
pinning with his upper body, pinning my upper body.
Was this, or was it like behind the back?
I just had him like cross in front of me, so I just ended up just like
Talladega Nights.
Yeah, it could be like that. But yeah, right. So we ended up where like my upper body essentially became a wedge against his upper body, and then I had to turn myself perpendicular in order to get my foot out of the weakest point, which is the space between his knees. And then you look at that, and it's like my goal with that game wasn't to try to knee cut. My goal was trying to get my foot out. And then like the thing that I did was like literally just a knee cut, right? And that's where I'm getting confused on ecological dynamics, because on one end of the spectrum, people are like Greg will say in his videos, like Greg literally will say in his videos that techniques don't exist, and I'm trying to wrap my head around what that means, but
well, it's okay. So let's say that techniques are like emotions. Okay.
Okay.
And the idea behind emotional intelligence and emotional regulation is that you can identify the emotion. You can identify being maybe infuriated versus being underappreciated, or feeling inferior versus feeling inadequate, right? So like inferior would be, they're maybe authority related. Like there's someone who has status more than me. They're more important than me. They have more competence than me. Like they're more belonging than me. They're more accepted. Versus inadequate is just that I have a standard that I'm trying to meet that maybe doesn't rely, like it's not about someone else. It's the standard that I've created, but I'm not meeting my own standards. And those elicit different responses. They elicit different places in your body that you're going to feel it. They're going to elicit different response behaviorally as well. Some people cry when they're angry, but the anger, like for me, I'll cry if I feel like there's nothing that I can do about it, because I'm just like so boiling angry that I feel helpless, right? So techniques wise, and this is also Brene Brown, Atlas of the Heart. It's a great series about her book. It's a 5-episode thing about emotions and labeling them and why that's important, because it's important for connection. It's important for teaching. It's important for sharing knowledge. So when you have a shared language with someone, that is where you create belonging. That's where you allow people to explore something, because you're like, well, here's the name for it. And now we know that we're speaking the same language.
Right.
And, it also is for people to pee on things. And what I mean by that is to put their name out there and be like, that's my move. I claim that. That's my move. Right. I tried doing that when I was a brown belt with that shin on the low belly. And then I have so I'm using that. Like I use my shin to kind of control if they're trying to like turn into me and turn away, getting their hips back down. And then I'll usually either use like a rebar where I grab pretty deep in the collar, and then I straighten my arms so they're turning away. And then I'll trap with my shin their near arm. And then I can do a bunch of stuff. I can wrist lock. I can spin for the armbar on the far arm. Like there's so many things you can do, and I'm just like kind of surfing. So I was like, this is the Herle position. And then people were like, I do that. And I'm like, what is it called then? They're like, oh, no. And I'm like, so.
Exactly. It's the Herle position.
Exactly, right? Now you know. So, we're all just looking to pee on things and leave our mark. And so, like, territorially, yeah, like that is a very big ego-driven aspect of technique. And I don't know if Greg has thought of that. I don't know if that has anything to do with that. But, like, at the same time, it's a level playing field, because if I just say, when you do this and you do this and that and that and then it's like,
this just made complete sense. I think I had an epiphany. Yeah, it's like that. Your emotional example was like the perfect way to describe it, because like it's like a shared vocabulary, so that you both know you're identifying the same experience, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
Right.
It's connection. It comes down to connection. And do you know how many times I was like, man, I wish I could do jiu-jitsu alone. I hate people. Because you got to deal with other people.
That's my problem.
You can do jiu-jitsu alone. I saw you the other night put your foot behind your head and lace your arm.
But it's like having shower arguments where you're like, dun, dun.
Yeah, I do.
You're playing both sides.
Make up arguments.
Yeah, you're playing both sides. So it's like, it would be difficult. Like I need the novelty to give me something to react to.
Yeah. And
that's where the affordances and constraints and all that goes into. And so the reason why I like that is because not everything fits into that puzzle. Not everything looks exactly like it does in training. Not everything looks like, okay, so here's a leg drag. There's so many ways to do leg drag. Sometimes you can stand, sometimes you put your knee down. Sometimes like some people put the knee where the hip is down and they have that leg up. Like people have reasons for doing what they're doing because it's going to blend into other techniques that they do. Or they've found that if they're the control, if I do the same position on everybody and I see their reactions, I can say, okay, this is more consistent or this is more high percentage. And that determines your personality. That determines how much energy that you have, how much cardio, how much strength. Determines your weight distribution. Some people are heavy on top. Some people are heavy on bottom. Some people are lanky. Some people are not. There are so many aspects. And so that's why you need to make it yours. Like you need to make it yours. Something in my program that I was just talking about with someone, they said never quote. And I know that you might think that you can never say it better than the author, but you need to say it in your own words. And where that kind of falls in line is when I'm working with athletes who may not be educated or maybe don't have the vocabulary that I do, I have to be able to quote unquote water or dumb it down, or I have to apply it to them. And so I need to basically pour the information in my brain, swish it around with what is already there, find the patterns, find the analogies, and then make it make sense. While also, if I'm a teacher, teachers care if their message is received. Bad teachers will just show it and not care if the person got it. They don't see it as the success. They see the just sending it out. If you get it, you get it. Right. But a good teacher says, I'm going to make sure that you understand it. And I might have to explain it in a couple different ways, but I'm going to make sure that when you walk away today, like you have a valid understanding. And maybe you're not going to get it all, but at least you're on the way to it.
Right. We talk about this at Victory, Submission, Strength all the time. Like it's exactly the thought process is, just try to give people, speak to them in a language that they understand, and, condense the information that we have and put it in a digestible way.
Mm-hmm.
Working with jiu-jitsu athletes, it's really easy because if we need somebody to straighten out their arm, I'm not going to say, extend your elbow. I'm going to say, armbar yourself.
Yeah.
It's really, really simple, right? Like everybody knows what that means. And,
yes.
and so, if we can use analogy and metaphorical terms to like get people to do stuff, I think is so powerful.
I really had a problem with like what is it? Analogical? Is that a word? With like using analogies. Analogical. With like using analogies and metaphors for coaching. I was like, because that's not precise. That's not describing what we're doing. I'm a big John Danaher fan.
Okay.
So like I really I've just been like binging all of his DVDs for like since I started jiu-jitsu basically, and then like Gordon Ryan too and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And this ecological dynamics thing is like upending my entire world, because I'm like, oh, this explains why when Matt says armbar yourself, somebody can now do that movement pattern without him describing like the angle that their arm needs to be at or something like that.
Yep.
Well, it's also going to be different for everybody, right? Like
yeah.
mine.
Yeah.
Mine is going to be pretty hard to do.
Yeah, I was impressive.
Well, yeah, it's just it's how I was born.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But knowing what knowing that person's where they're at, mm-hmm. and being able to judge, like, how do I make sure this message is sent? And what you're talking about with like Danaher and stuff is philosophy. And something that I've realized that would help me so much is like, there is no one way to do things, but people will tell you there's only one way to do things. And this could be because they decided it worked for them. They maybe said like, no, I've tried this on a lot of people and I think it will help people make sense and streamline the information, whatever it is. Or it could be malicious. It could be, wahaha, I want people to buy all of my stuff so that I can retire off of jiu-jitsu, whatever it is. But there is no one way to do things. There is a way for you to do things.
Right. That's what they talk about. I was reading, I just finished How We Learn to Move by Rob Gray. Have you
No, but I know that Rob Gray is one of the main like ecological guys.
Yeah. And that's what he was saying, because they do these studies across all kinds of different sports, hockey, baseball, soccer. And they've done all these studies where they're looking at how people actually move and like when they're executing a certain technique. And not only is there an extreme amount of variance between athletes, but also within the same athlete. Like mm-hmm. Nobody can ever replicate the same movement, even like within themselves. And all these studies are pointing to like literally like it seems obvious saying it out loud, but it's like the individual athlete, your constraints that you have just in your body are going to be completely different than like anybody else, and that's going to dictate the movements that are going to be optimal for you to like.
So not only do you need to know what your affordances and constraints are, which I've done with a couple clients, we've talked about it, you need to know when to use certain things, and you also need to know to accept it, because so many times we're like, no, I want to be good at berimbolo. Like I trained with all the people for the berimbolos. I can defend a berimbolo like a mother. I might have to accept the sweep, but you're not going to take my back. Now, when I go to do it, I get upside down and I'm like, where are the hips? Where did they go? Like, it's not my thing. And it's just not my thing, and that's okay. Could I force it to be my thing? Yeah, but like, is that really serving me? Are there better ways that I could spend my time that makes more sense into what could go into my existing game?
Yeah, right. And this is different than like limiting yourself by like bad self-beliefs, right? You don't want to also call yourself like the person who can't do barambolos, right? Because like
right.
you could.
What I said before, yeah,
Right.
the takedowns, yeah.
Right.
I mean, I have significant proof. One time I did go for it, and I ended up on top into the leg drag position, but it's and I've.
You're talking about the barambolo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So.
But completing it, you know,
Yeah,
it's just like, nope. Like I train with Mikey, I train with I train with Meow. It's like it was just like, here I am. They're teaching me all these different ways. Isaac, they're teaching me all their different ways, and I'm like, no, and this is not my thing. And that's okay, because my spider guard is really good, and my knee slice is really good, and my floating passing and everything else. And so that goes into like, do we focus on our strengths or do we focus on our weaknesses? And Homolo used to say, you know, I don't need to work on spider guard all the time. I always remember it. It's my thing. I can go back to it. Yeah. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that he's going to say, well, I'm not working on spider guard, so I'm not going to whip it out in competition. Like, yeah, if he's not being challenged and he wants to create a new challenge, I want to try to beat people with a different type of game. Mm-hmm. Like, look at Rafa Mendez. He kind of like innovated himself every single time you would fight him. You come up with a different game plan. And that's personal. It's a philosophy. But if you don't train what you know, or if you don't rely on what you know, or you only think about the holes that you have in your game, that's not going to lead to competence. That's not going to lead to confidence.
Right.
It's just going to look, and that could be approach to mastery, right? But if you forget the things that you're good at, or if you're becoming too overwhelmed by the things that you're not good at, it's like chasing someone who is never going to love you back, or who is emotionally unavailable. Right. Not easy to say, like, all right, not, you know, it shouldn't head that direction, and we can get fixated on it. But we're not looking to fix ourselves, right? You can't, as a coach, you can't look as a deficit detective. You can't look at, all right, I'm going to tell you everything that's going wrong. It's like, no, like, do the sandwich approach. You did this great. You can work on this. This is great,
you need
too.
some success, otherwise you just get discouraged.
Right, exactly, completely.
Walk away from
and like, it's not about being like militant or straightforward or direct. Like the people that are like, I'm just really blunt.
Yeah,
I'm
just really straightforward.
I'm just that, like, no, dude, you're mean.
Yeah.
You are mean. There are nice ways to say things, and there are
nice
malicious
and,
ways to say things.
Right,
like both and that's what people don't understand. They really want to live in extremes. They really want to say, I'm a passer.
Right.
I'm a guard player. And it's like, surprise, you need both.
Right.
And eventually you'll get there where, like, you're not surviving.